I woke up to the smell of burnt toast. That was the first sign. The second was the silence. No birthday wishes, no good morning, not even the clatter of dishes, just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's waiting for something to go wrong. I padded into the kitchen of our Charlotte home, familiar, modest, worn. My husband's mother, Joan, was already there, standing by the stove like she owned the place. She glanced up, her smile tight. "Oh, look who's finally up. Must be nice, not having to rush off to anything," she said, flipping the eggs a little too aggressively. I didn't bite. I smiled instead, out of habit more than anything. "Good morning." The chair scraped the floor as I sat down. The table was set, but the atmosphere was ice cold. Joan's comments weren't new. She always found a way to remind me, subtly but sharply, that I'd never measured up. Today was no exception, despite it being my birthday. My husband, Matt, scrolled his phone without looking up. His sister, Karen, sipped her coffee with eyes that refused to meet mine. Around the table were Matt's cousins, people I only saw once or twice a year, brought here under the banner of family tradition. Everyone was present, and everyone was quiet. Joan had insisted on hosting the birthday lunch, again. "It's what we do," she'd said. But really, it was about control, her house, her rules, her chance to hold court. The cousins smiled politely, made small talk, but it all felt staged. I nodded and laughed where appropriate, feeling more like an accessory than a person. There were no balloons, no cake yet, just the tension of a family pretending they liked each other for the sake of appearances. Last year had been the same, maybe colder, maybe not. It all blurred now. When Joan finally served the main dish, a dry roast she was inexplicably proud of, she leaned across the table and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You know, Maddie's still doing that little online thing, right? What is it, knitting tutorials?" "It's actually business consulting now," I said calmly. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. Joan smirked. "Ah, that's cute. A hobby with a title. We've got nurses, a lawyer, even an engineer in this family. So proud of how everyone's turned out." A few chuckles followed. Even Matt's mouth curled into something that resembled a smile. I stared down at my plate. My chest tightened, not with shame, but with something else. The kind of ache that builds when you've kept too much in for too long. What they didn't know, and wouldn't know, not yet, was that I had inherited everything after my father passed. The fortune, the properties, the mansion outside town. I had stayed silent because I was tired of proving myself to people who only saw what they wanted to see. But their laughter, it pressed on an old wound. Then came the speech. Joan stood, fork in hand like a queen's scepter, and tapped her glass. "I just want to say how grateful we are to have Maddie in the family," she began. "So humble, never brags, even though, well, she hasn't done much to brag about. But still, she's here, helping where she can." The table laughed again, more freely this time. Matt added, "She may not finish things often, but she sure starts a lot." That got an even bigger laugh. I smiled, not a genuine one, not even a fake one, just a placeholder. Something to keep my face from showing what was boiling inside. I wasn't embarrassed, not anymore. I was done feeling small, done playing along. Inside, a quiet switch flipped. This would be the last time they laughed at me, the last time they spoke over me like I wasn't in the room. I'd been the helpful one, the peacemaker, the ghost that cleaned up after family messes, but I wasn't invisible, not anymore. I bit my tongue so much over the years, I thought. I forgot how to speak my truth. The lunch dragged on. Joan passed around cake without candles. No one sang. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, grabbing my coat. "I think I'm coming down with something." Joan waved me off. "Try some vitamins." No one else said anything. Outside, I slipped into my car, the door shutting with a finality that felt overdue. I sat for a minute, letting the silence hug me. Then, out of nowhere, I cried. Not out of sadness, not even from anger. It was clarity. I remembered something my father once told me over coffee, years before he got sick. "Let them underestimate you," he said. "It'll make the reveal all the more powerful." I smiled through the tears, pulled out my phone and dialed. "Hi, David. Let's move the timeline up." "I want everything ready by next week." My lawyer's voice came through the line. "You sure?" I've never been more sure. The morning after the birthday lunch felt like walking through fog. I woke up in our apartment, not at Joan's house. That was intentional. After I left early, I drove around aimlessly for a while before finally coming home to the one place where I didn't have to smile on command. The apartment was dead quiet, too quiet. No TV, no movement, no soft shuffle of Matt's feet in the kitchen, just a sticky note on the kitchen counter. Sorry about Mom, you know how she is. That was it. No happy birthday. No, how are you feeling? Just that tired, cowardly phrase. You know how she is. And the worst part? I did. I knew exactly how she was, but I was only just now admitting it to myself. I stared at the note, my hand still trembling from everything I hadn't said the day before. And it hit me. I had stopped expecting decency from the people closest to me. At some point, I'd trained myself to be okay with scraps of affection. I used to have standards. Somewhere along the way, they slipped out of my hands, and I didn't even notice. I sat at the kitchen table, running my fingers along the edge of my coffee mug, and remembered. It was about 6 years ago. I'd been married just over a year, still new enough to think marriage meant someone would defend you in every room you weren't in. I had just applied for a team lead position at the design firm I was working at. I was qualified, excited, and for once, confident. Joan had tagged along to a company BBQ. I thought nothing of it. She was just the +1 to Matt. My manager, Susan, had stopped by to say hello. Joan introduced herself before I could, pulling her into conversation like she'd been waiting for it. I still remember how she leaned in close and laughed, just loud enough for me to hear. Maddie's so passionate, but sometimes she takes things a little too personally, you know? She has a sensitive streak. Runs in her side of the family. That phrase followed me like smoke. A week later, Susan told me they were going in a different direction, said I wasn't the right cultural fit. I had no proof Joan caused it, just that sinking feeling that never left. And when I told Matt, he waved it off. You're being paranoid. She wouldn't do that. So I let it go. And letting it go became my full-time job. Joan's specialty was weaponizing manners. Every favor came with a string. Every compliment had a hook. She offered help the way a spider offers shelter. I gave up small pieces of myself to avoid conflict. First my career ambitions, then my independence, eventually my voice. It all felt easier than fighting. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago. Joan had taken over the guest list, rearranged the table seating, even told me not to wear red because it clashed with the decor. I changed. I smiled. I thanked her. What kind of love demands you shrink to fit in? I stared out the window. That question rattled in my chest. Later that afternoon, I drove across town to see Cassie. Cassie was my old college roommate. We hadn't caught up properly in years, but I knew she'd understand. She opened the door, took one look at me, and said, "You've got that face again, the one you used to get before a panic attack." I sat down at her kitchen table while she poured 2 cups of coffee. "You remember when I almost moved to New York with you?" I asked, swirling the steam with my spoon. "Yeah. You didn't because of Matt." "No, I didn't because of Joan." Cassie didn't flinch. She knew. "She never liked me," Cassie said. "Told you I was a bad influence. Said I encouraged rebellion." "You did," I smiled. "Damn right I did." We both laughed, but it was short-lived. Cassie looked at me carefully. "What if they're not your family, Maddie? What if they're just captors with matching last names?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The tears welling in my eyes said enough. Back home, I dug out my old laptop from the closet. It still had the same stickers I slapped on it years ago. Quotes, memories, a fading coffee ring stain on the lid. I opened it, typed in the old password, and the screen blinked to life. One file stared at me. Draft resignation letter. Right below it, Dream Studio proposal. I clicked both. The resignation letter had been untouched since 2018. The proposal, though, it was detailed. Sketches, budget outlines, even branding ideas. I had built a life I never got to live. "It's not too late," I whispered. I reached for my phone and dialed my financial advisor. "I need to set up a meeting," I said. Soon, discreetly. Are we moving forward? He asked. Yes, and I meant it, not with anger, not even with revenge, with clarity. I agreed to go to Joan's BBQ because Matt said I owed her a show of goodwill. Inside, I felt like I was walking into a lion's den wearing wet clothes. The yard was warmed by summer sun, children running around, laughter in the air, but I could taste the underlying tension. Joan greeted me with a wide smile, her hand extended, but her eyes held a quiet edge. Good to see you're here, she said, voice soft. I nodded, offered thanks, and moved into the crowd, careful to keep my shoulders squared. Every polite greeting I returned felt like armor. A teenage niece approached with lowered voice. Grandma said you've been seeing a therapist, that you're not stable. My pulse skipped. I saw faces turn, my stomach flipped. The public whisper was a knife. She had begun the game. I remembered a night years ago. Mom had been hospitalized with pneumonia. The bills piled up. Joan offered help. She wired funds, for 1 week, she said. Later, at a holiday dinner, she held up the check in front of everyone. We took care of them, she said, gesturing to Mom's seat. Laughter followed. It must be nice to always depend on others. That night I wept in the bathroom while guests toasted. That moment taught me caution. And I began saving everything. Emails, receipts, voice memos. I never trusted again. Back at the BBQ, Joan cornered me by the drinks table. We care about you, she said, tone soft. But you've been distant. Her words felt lighter than stones. Across the yard, a cousin added, maybe you should get professional help. Their voices were quiet, but meant for me. Their gaze turned. My heart hammered. I wanted to shout, curse, run, but I stayed calm. I simply walked away. Later, at home, I confronted Matt. Did you know what she's saying? I asked. He avoided eye contact. She worries about you, he said. She means well. I listed names, dates, behavior patterns. He didn't deny, but he didn't defend either. Silence settled between us like a new wall. That night, I wrote in my journal, today I chose not to be your punching bag. I hid it in my safe. Next, I launched a file called Pattern of Abuse. I began shifting finances away from joint accounts. I didn't tell Matt yet. I didn't need affirmation. The war had quietly begun. I arrived late Friday afternoon. Joan had invited the entire family for what she called a peaceful weekend gathering. Her estate looked exactly the same from the outside. Majestic, draped in ivy, southern charm painted in beige and brick. But the moment I stepped in, something was different. The portraits lining the hallway had been rearranged. My photo, once beside Matt's, was gone. One of the commemorative plaques I'd helped design had been replaced with a quote about foundational women. No names, no credits, just silence dressed up as elegance. Joan met me at the door like I was a guest, not family. So glad you came, she said, tone dripping with warmth, but eyes hard and measuring. I responded with a nod, my smile rehearsed, my heart bracing. I'd walked into this house before, first as a guest, then as a daughter-in-law, eventually as the woman who paid for half the renovations when Joan's husband passed and the finances got tight. But none of that was visible now. Later that evening, after dinner had settled and the family was scattered around the living room, Joan invited me upstairs. Thought you might want to see the updated archives, she said. Her voice was sweet, her walk steady, almost ceremonial. We entered the study. She walked me through framed photographs, old letters, some historical family documents, all carefully curated, none showing my name. She gestured toward a section of framed portraits. Those who built this deserve recognition. I stared at a photo of my mother, seated at a church fundraiser years ago, with Joan smiling in the background, labeled patron. I remembered that day. Mom had just lost her job. Joan swooped in, wrote a check, and made it clear she was saving our dignity. That winter, at Christmas dinner, she made a toast thanking the women who gracefully accept help when they can't manage on their own. Laughter followed. My mother shrank in her chair. I excused myself and cried in the hallway. I never forgot that. Dinner was worse. Joan stood up with a wine glass and began a speech about legacy. The Sloan women have always held this family together, from the pioneers who braved storms to the mothers who raised our best men. Applause. She continued, naming ancestors, wives, children, never me. And to the daughter-in-law who humbly supports us in silence, she added, raising her glass. I smiled, I had to, but something cracked. That kind of silence isn't humility, it's erasure. And I saw it happening in real time. Matt clinked his glass to mine. To partnership, he said. He thought he was defending me. I nodded. Let it pass. But I felt it. The suffocation not of being insulted, but of being invisible. When the guests left and the night settled into quiet, I found Joan alone in the study. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. I pointed at the archives. You edited out my name. You rewrote what happened. She blinked, then smiled. Honey, my memory is just clearer than yours. I pulled up old receipts from my phone, showed her the records, renovation payments, fundraiser invoices, personal journal entries. Her lips thinned. I didn't wait for an apology. I turned and walked out. I didn't need her guilt. I needed the truth. Back home, I opened the folder on my laptop titled Truth Ledger. I began drafting a plan, itemizing everything I contributed, everything she erased. I called a friend from college who worked in historic preservation. I need someone who documents truth, I said. Then I called my lawyer. Before going to bed, I checked my email. One new message, no subject, no sender. We're watching. I stared at the screen. My chest tightened. Not from fear, from adrenaline. They knew I was moving. I sat through the Sunday brunch, gripping my fork like it sure had a mind of its own. Joan leaned over mid-course and said, with that fake softness, You know, Maddie, people notice when you stay quiet too long. The gentle turn of that sentence, wrapped in concern, felt like a stone in my chest. I didn't laugh. I didn't shrivel. I replied quietly, but firmly, It's exhausting pretending your words don't hurt. Silence swallowed the table. Chairs shifted. Joan's lips parted, speechless. I finished my eggs in calm, mechanical precision, then stood and walked away. I didn't expect applause. Just that shift. They saw me, not as a ghost, but that I refused to vanish. I told myself, I don't owe them my silence anymore. Back home, I confronted Matt. His eyes flickered, half regret, half denial. Do you believe me or your mother? I asked. He twisted a ring on his finger. Let's not fight this now, he said. That was his shield. You don't have to fight them. But if you won't protect me, don't claim me, I answered. That cracked something in him. He didn't argue. He didn't sway. He just watched me leave, walking off not angry, but sure. The division between us stretched in the air. I called my cousin Marin, the one who walked away years ago. Her voice on the phone was a beacon. You're not crazy, she said. You're the first one brave enough to say it. She shared her memories, Joan undermining her. She offered me help, legal support, emotional backup, a place if I ever needed it. My chest tightened with gratitude. I realized I wasn't alone. I just needed someone to show up for me. Later, I quietly moved funds, redirected part of my income into a separate trust under my name. I met with an old business partner, discussing expansion outside the family orbit. We drafted new contracts, restructured partnership terms. I flipped through the prenup. There was a clause in my favor Joan must have forgotten. I whispered to myself, if they want to fight, I won't bring a knife to a gunfight. And for once, the silence was reassuring, not stifling. A few days passed. A letter arrived at our mailbox. No sender. Inside was a photograph of a younger Joan, younger Matt, and me, captioned in Joan's handwriting, Family is everything, don't ruin it. My breath caught. This was a move meant to guilt me. I pulled a pen and wrote across the photo, Family doesn't manipulate. I slipped it under Matt's pillow. I didn't expect reaction. I expected recognition. And waiting, I felt the difference. The crack had been made. I was no longer quiet. I was not invisible. The air in the dining room felt electric, like a storm waiting to break. I sat between Matt and Joan at the grand dining table, silverware rattling, crystal glasses clinking, polite laughter filling hollow spaces. She raised her glass. "To family unity," she declared, then tilted her voice with that practiced softness. "We hope everyone is transparent about their contributions." I forced my lips to stay still as the words drilled into me. Then a cousin, Margot, chimed in from across the table, loud enough for the whole room. "Funny how some of us seem to live without real income." The hush came as if a trapdoor opened under me. I felt the sting, the weight of being judged in front of people who'd never seen me clearly. I held Matt's eyes. He flinched, but I didn't look away. Later, Joan cornered me in the hallway, voice low. "You loaned yourself money to look like you're doing well, didn't you?" Her insinuation hit like cold water. She spread rumors about shell companies, manipulated loan documents, fabricated financial illusions, the kind she once laughed about in her quiet way. I kept calm outwardly. Inside, a rage built a steady pulse. I asked for proof. She smirked. "You'll see soon," she said. I recognized this move, same pattern she used against my mother years ago. I had learned to expect betrayal. Back at home, I pulled up my financial records, trust documents, bank transfers, shell accounts. I pored over them. There it was, a tiny typo in my name on an old document. I realized this was no accident. Someone had left it so someone could claim I'd manipulated things. I called my lawyer. "Check this discrepancy," I said. "I need you to vet everything." He promised to dig deeper. I began drafting a public statement, a careful, factual piece that could stand in court or in public. I wasn't afraid of exposure. I feared the lie would spread first and be accepted before I had a chance to speak. That night, I sent a message to the family group chat. "I'll not respond to gossip. Facts speak louder than whispers." I didn't name names. I didn't use exclamation marks. I just tapped send. Several seconds later, Joan responded tersely, "Noted." Others were silent. Something shifted. Power didn't reverse fully, but the balance wavered. I sensed their unease. That was enough. I lay awake in bed, listening to my own heartbeat in the dark. The familiar shame had retreated. The war line had been drawn. I reopened my pattern of abuse file and added today's entries: insult, insinuation, threat. In my mind, I said, this isn't about hurting them. It's about refusing to be hurt anymore. Before sleep claimed me, I drafted a subject line: send to every family member. In the daylight, I would choose to go public or go silent forever. I'd worn red on purpose, bold, unapologetic, the kind of color that doesn't shrink when stared at. The estate ballroom buzzed with polished small talk and wine glasses clinking like wind chimes. Every surface gleamed. The family had pulled out all the stops for this gala dinner: local dignitaries, country club types, even a city councilman I vaguely recognized from TV. I walked in on Matt's arm, but I felt alone, not in fear, just detached, like a witness to my own unraveling. Joan greeted us with a gracious smile, perfectly fake, then turned to hand out the evening's dinner menus. When she gave me mine, she hesitated just long enough for it to register. I looked down. Miss Rita. Not even my last name, not even Mrs., a deliberate cut, delicate in delivery, brutal in intent. I looked around. A few guests whispered. One woman hid a smirk behind her flute of Prosecco. My hand tightened around the menu, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I folded it in half and set it quietly beside my plate. That moment, the quiet humiliation, it didn't hollow me out like it used to. Instead, I mentally added it to the growing ledger. Noted, and filed. The dinner marched on through the salad course. I kept to myself, made polite conversation, smiled just enough. Then the MC tapped the mic, announcing a surprise family montage. Joan nodded from her seat, clearly proud. The screen lowered. It began with vintage photos: Joan and Richard's wedding, childhood pictures of Matt and his siblings. Guests cooed at the nostalgia. Then it shifted. The audio wasn't crisp, but it was clear enough. Joan's voice, unmistakable. "She's fragile. All it takes is a whisper and she folds. Gasps rippled through the room. The footage wasn't grainy. It had been shot on a phone, vertical. Probably one of the nieces, the younger daughter-in-law. In the video, Joan was casually pouring wine while coaching the girl. If you want space in this family, you need to learn how to undercut her. Subtly, make her question herself. I didn't breathe. Joan's expression froze. Her wine glass stopped mid-air. The montage ended abruptly. A beat of silence, then the low thrum of whispered reactions. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Joan stood. Fumbled. That wasn't... I never intended... No one asked her to finish. Matt glanced at me. His face was pale. The cousin from the other night avoided eye contact. I took a sip of water. Cool. Steady. This was never about vengeance. It was about truth. And tonight, truth spoke without me lifting a finger. After the guests trickled out, I waited near the foyer, watching Joan trail behind them with forced laughter and quick goodbyes. When it was just us, I approached. I held up the flash drive in my palm. I let you rewrite history long enough. Now I reclaim it. She stared at it, eyes wide. You did this? I let it happen, I corrected. She hissed. You betrayed the family. No, I said. You betrayed me, repeatedly, and now? You can either apologize publicly or this spreads wider. Joan's mask cracked. For the first time in years, I saw fear behind those perfectly penciled brows. She turned and stormed off without another word. I didn't stop her. Upstairs, I changed out of the red dress and sat in silence. My pulse still thundered, but I didn't feel shaky. I pulled out my journal, flipped to a clean page, and wrote, Tonight, I let truth echo louder than lies. Just as I capped the pen, a knock at my door startled me. I froze, then rose. The silhouette behind the frosted glass looked familiar, but I hesitated. I walked into that ballroom as though I owned the moment, because I did. The chandeliers glowed, the red carpet unfurled before me, and every camera flash was a pulse announcing my arrival. Joan stood at the podium, greeting guests with practiced warmth. She introduced me quietly. Our daughter-in-law. Her voice carried an undertone of control, minimal credit, maximum oversight. I felt anticipation in the air, people leaning forward, eyes flicking toward me. I surveyed the walls, family crests, plaques, portraits, every name present but mine. My chest tightened. This was the stage. I was ready. Joan began a speech about those who quietly serve. Her phrasing was gentle, yet she lingered on quiet dedication. That's when I stood. The hush came first. I said, cool but clear, I don't serve quietly anymore. I held the room's gaze. I revealed documents, contracts, deeds, bank statements, all bearing my name, proof that I financed the estate expansions, held the long-term leases, maintained the balance sheets. I played a voice recording where Joan admitted erasing my contributions. I brought out photo archives annotated with my work, designs, plans, invoices. Faces went pale. Mrs. von Sloan tried to interrupt. I didn't let her. The proof spoke louder than her excuses. Then I struck the final blow. I told them I was withdrawing my financial ties. Shares held in family trusts were being severed. I declared I would lead my own path outside the shadow of legacy. Guests murmured. Joan's jaw dropped. Matt looked stricken. My voice rang firm. I will not be controlled by legacy or lineage. The balance tipped. I felt strength land in my bones. In the aftermath, silence reigned. Joan was frozen. Some relatives hovered, uncertain. Matt stood beside me, hesitant, maybe scared, but present. Cameras clicked, guests retreated. I replayed the arc of my journey. Silence, betrayal, truth, reclamation. The gala ended early. My heart, still racing, felt lighter. Back home, I exhaled. The weight lifted. I checked texts and voicemails, messages of shock, support, questions. I updated the truth ledger with tonight's proof. I thought, tonight I became more than a shadow in their history. I poured wine, sat at my desk, and waited for the next move. The morning light spilled across the hardwood floor, soft and forgiving. I stood barefoot by the window, holding a cup of coffee. There was no sound but the occasional chirp of birds and the gentle ticking of the kitchen clock. No one called out my name. No one questioned my place. The quiet was not empty. It was earned. After the gala, I'd turn down every interview, every media request. Let them write their own versions. I wouldn't hand them mine. Matt hadn't tried to persuade me otherwise. He moved carefully around my new boundaries. I noticed that, and I appreciated it. I sat on the couch, legs tucked under, looking out past the trees. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was bracing for something. I just was. The pen felt natural in my hand again. I'd started writing about what happened, but more about what could be learned, not just a memoir, a guide maybe, for women like me who'd played polite and paid the price. When the letter arrived from the Women's Advocacy Fund, I reread it 3 times. They wanted me to lead a mentorship program, not just speak, lead. I said yes. The first time I stood in that shelter and looked into the eyes of those young women, some scared, some angry, all surviving, I saw my reflection 10 years ago. My voice shook a little, but the words came, "Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply says, not anymore." After that, the calls changed. Old friends, former critics, even distant cousins. Suddenly, they saw me. Or at least, they couldn't ignore me. I wasn't seeking their approval anymore, but I didn't turn them away either. I chose my responses carefully. Respect, now earned, was returned in kind. It was late one afternoon, just before sunset, when I saw the car pull up. Joan. No warning. No text. Just her silhouette at my front step. I didn't move at first. My gut said to let her walk away. But I opened the door. She looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. "I didn't see you," she said softly, "not until you stood taller than all of us." She didn't bring excuses, just a framed photo from the gala, one I hadn't seen. I was in the center. For a second, I didn't know what to feel. It wasn't approval I craved. It was honesty. And for the first time, she gave it. I didn't hug her, but I nodded. That was enough. I spent the next week in my office, rearranging what mattered. I took down old plaques that bore other people's names for things I had done. In their place, I hung letters, handwritten notes from the women I now mentored, smiling photos from workshops, a journal entry from a girl who wrote, "You made me believe I'm not broken." I cried reading that, not because it hurt, but because it healed. I started a scholarship, named it after my mother. She never got the chance to build a legacy, so I built one for her. I no longer needed the rooms to be silent to be heard. My house, once sterile and silent, now echoed with laughter from shared dinners, strategy sessions, and spontaneous storytelling. And tonight, I finished the last page of my book. I wrote, "This isn't revenge, this is redefinition." I added the photo from the gala, me standing alone, back straight, chin lifted. I titled it, "The Day I Stood Alone and Won." I clicked send to the publisher. I stepped outside, barefoot again. My neighbor waved from across the fence. I waved back, smiled. No masks, no armor, just me. The wind carried the scent of fall. I breathed deep, calm, no bitterness, just beginnings. And just when I thought it was over, the doorbell rang again.